Hey there, everybody. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Perfect Albums. In the co-captain's chair for this third episode in this series, Mr. Butch Jones. Happening, my
Hey,
friend? What's going on?
not too much in this snowy Monday.
I know, more snow here in New York. We can't escape it this year. Cannot escape it. So
Nope.
if you've watched the first couple episodes of this show, I did the first two episodes with Martin Popla, which is joining me for this one. We got Guitar Hack joining me for next week. This is basically kind of like a revolving cast to talk about some of our favorite albums that we feel are pretty perfect from start to finish, top to bottom. So in other words, we don't skip any songs on it. We still, if it's stuff that we've heard and listened to for years and years and years, we're still not sick of the albums. And in our minds, in our opinions, it doesn't get much better than this. So I've asked Butch to pick out five. I've got five, and I'm going to have him start off with his number one, or his first pick, I should say.
On my first pick, yep. Well, yeah, like you said, these are all my picks. So you guys can disagree, whatever. This is what I believe and what I think, and these albums, I love them and listen to each one of them a lot still. So my fifth pick, it's a little New Jersey band called Overkill. The album Horoscope. God, I honestly, I really do think that this is quite well, you know what, for me, I think this is the most perfect thrash album that's been recorded. There's a lot of great ones. I love a lot of bands. I love Rust in Peace, the early Metallica stuff and everything. But man, for me, Overkill's Horoscope is just a masterpiece to me. It's one song after the other, and like the umpteenth version lineup of Overkill, because they had like a different lineup every record, it almost seems like. But but in the 90s, I even forget what year, like 91, I think, 90 or 91, something like that. Man, this record is a masterpiece. So can't skip over anything. It just gets better. I mean, even the way it opens with this kind of builds up and it gets going, and then once it hits, it's on for the rest of the record. So, God, Nice Day for a Funeral to me is
that's a good one.
Yeah, it's one of it's the top two Overkill songs for me, and I love that song. I love that record. So, Overkill's Horoscope is my number 5.
So let me pose something to you. So, we often talk about some of those greats of thrash metal, right, in history, right? And you mentioned a couple names before there, and Metallica, Megadeth, maybe even Slayer. There's a couple bands in that kind of subgenre of metal who have what many would consider those perfect albums. I would argue that Overkill probably has more of them that are either perfect or damn close to them than any of them.
Yeah, I agree, man. That's you always talk about the big four and who's the fifth. Everyone, well, not everyone, a lot of people say Testament, but I'll take Overkill in that slot any day of the week.
I take them both. Both. They both deserve to be up there.
Absolutely. Overkill to me is one of the only thrash bands. I guess Testament would be in this too. They have been consistent their whole run. There's not a bad album. There's no, let's go over here and try to very often do something a little different. It's thrash metal. This is what you're going to get. This is what we do. And like I said, the 25 different lineup changes that they've had, but they still always sound like Overkill. Blitz and Dee Dee are the nucleus of that band. And man, yeah, I 100% agree with you. Absolutely.
I love them. All right. I'm going to go way back here to 1969, actually. Perhaps one of the originators of what we later started calling progressive rock, and a pretty mind-blowing album for 1969. Pretty heavy album in spots, definitely out there musically and unlike anything we'd ever heard before. Of course, we're talking about Or the Crimson King by the Mighty King Crimson, and who could forget that album cover there.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, this is another one of those bands that have a handful of albums that could be considered perfect, and I looked at a few of them, and I was like, well, I could talk about Red, I could talk about Larks, Tongues and Aspic, I could talk about Discipline, I could talk about a bunch of them, but I figured let me go all the way back to the beginning where it started, because man, 21st Century Schizoid, man, the lovely I Talk to the Wind, the absolutely heart-wrenchingly, emotionally gorgeous Epitaph, which is probably one of my favorite songs of all time. The really atmospheric, moody Moonchild, and then of course the huge Mellotron strains of In the Court of the Crimson King, the title track. Doesn't get much better than this. Fripp's crazy guitar work, Greg Lake on vocals. Man, that Mellotron, just love it. I still to this day listen to this all the time, and not a weak moment in the entire thing. It's all, and one of the things too that I'm sure you'll agree with is a lot of these albums we're going to talk about, I tend to always want to listen to from start to finish. I'm not interested in taking cuts out of them and doing the shuffle thing. I want to hear, if I want to hear anything from this album, I want to hear the whole fucking album.
Yeah, exactly. Right? In running order. Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. When you mess with that, it's like, wait a second, that doesn't go there.
Right. Yep. Yeah. No, 100%. Absolutely agree with you. Absolutely.
All right. What do you got next?
All right. Well, a debut that I would imagine, or at least hope that everyone that's watching this owns, because it pretty much is, it's a phenomenal debut, and it is a perfect album from beginning to end. I mean, you guys that watch this channel, you know how I feel about Edward, and I happen to have a vintage 1980 Invasion shirt on. But yeah, I mean, this record just it means so much to so many, and there's so many different reasons why. But just from top to bottom, there's not a track that you can skip over. I mean, granted, do I need to hear Eruption and You Really Got Me again? No, I've heard it enough, but it's great. They're both great. It's like if it's on, I'll listen to it. Do I go to seek out those 2 songs or 1.5 songs, however you want to do it? No, but as a part of the package, it
belongs, right? Where they both belong.
Oh, God, it's just life-changing. That's one of those life-changing records, man. Just everything about it, from his playing, from Eddie's playing, to the tone, to just what they were doing, what they brought to the world in 1978 at a time where hard rock and quote-unquote metal was dead. No one wanted to hear about it. Forget about it being underground. Disco and punk were around. The new wave thing was happening too. So you had all these things, and here comes this LA band that had been trying forever to get signed and shoves it down everybody's throat. So that's a perfect one.
Yeah, I would agree with that. In fact, knowing you were going to be on the show, I had a feeling you were going to pick that. So that was also on my larger list, but one of us had to cover it, right?
Yeah.
And, Butch and I didn't talk about running order here on the show today, so I wasn't going to talk about this one next. Since you talked about that one, I think you know what's coming next. So here's a little band that probably greatly influenced that band that you just talked about. In fact, the same guy produced the album. How about this one?
All right. That could be on my list. Very, very easy.
Ronnie, Montrose, Sammy, Hagar and company. I mean, this album to me is like, it's compact. The songs nothing's really long on this album. It's just one barn burner after another. Rock the Nation. I mean, and again, you talk about like running order. You have to hear this in this order because, this is one of those albums I've heard so many times in my life, and I know it so well. And if they all have to follow each other, right? Rock the Nation, Bad Motor Scooter, Space Station #5, right? I Don't Want It, Good Rockin' Tonight, Rock Candy, One Thing on My Mind, Make It Last. Oh, Make It Last. What a great album closer, right? I love Ronnie's guitar tone. And the weird thing, and we've talked about this before here on the channel, it's like, I don't understand how you go from this amazing debut with that lineup, and then Paper Money comes out and it doesn't quite hit the mark, not even close. A couple good songs, but the rest of it's just like, what happened here?
Yeah.
And I just,
this is a shame. Yeah. I mean, that pretty much sums up his career.
Yeah. Because I mean, when you think about it, if they would have kind of really come back with another strong album, does Montrose all of a sudden become one of the biggest bands, in this country? Certainly.
Right.
Because I mean, the first album, as great as it is, wasn't a tremendous blockbuster at the time. I think it's only been certified gold till many years later, but it's one of those albums that deserved so much better.
Absolutely. It's an absolutely perfect record. That's an absolute perfect pick.
The vocals, the riffs, the solos, the grooves, man, love it. So that's my second choice.
Shit, the album that opens up with Rock the Nation. I couldn't think of just that riff. You know, you like if you've never heard Montrose before, and that's the first thing you hear, is you hear that you're like, whoa, what's this?
Where's this been all my life, right?
Oh God, fantastic, fantastic.
Yeah.
So my number 3 is an album. If anybody knows me personally, you've heard me talk about this band, and if you follow me on Facebook or a Facebook friend, I've talked about this band a lot. This is one of the bands that definitely falls under the category. I've never heard of them before, and I love this band. Bunch of the guys in the band became friends over the years. The drummer has gone on to some great things. It's actually the drummer I pick in our fantasy band. The band, I guess you could call them, they were in that era of the new metal in you. They didn't sound like those bands. They're from Florida. The band is called Scrape, and it's got this great,
album cover, right? Yeah.
Album cover is just an infected toe. The name of the album is called New Killer America. I tell you, man, when I heard this the first time, the guitar tone is ferocious. The drummer is Will Hunt. Like I've mentioned him before. We've become buddies. He's plays in He's a drummer in Evanescence now, but he did a Black Label Society record and did part of the tour on the album that he. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah, he played on the album and did a little bit of the tour. And then another friend, Johnny Kelly, actually ended up taking over the tour. Johnny from Typo Negative. But Will's also toured with Static X, and he's done a bunch of things. Actually played with George Lynch in that the new band that I can't think of the name of the band now. That I think they played 3 shows. The End Machine. The End Machine. That's it. He wasn't on the album.
Who can keep up with what George is doing, man?
God bless him. He's the hardest working man in show business, man. Now that James Brown is gone, Lynch definitely takes it. But anyway, but the Scrape record, I think it's from 2001. It's heavy. I love the vocals. Will Hunt's drumming on it, and this is definitely one of my favorite recorded drum sounds ever. Is Will on this album? This album just crushes. Somebody out there is like, yeah, Scrape. I love that fucking band. But unfortunately, you and me are the only one that knew them. But if you can listen to this on YouTube, it's on Spotify too. Even though we don't like the streaming services, but if you've never heard them before, you got to check them out someplace. But Scrape with a K, New Killer America, absolutely. I would literally say that this album, this debut, is in my top 10 albums of all time. I love this album. I can't get enough of it. It's in that era where guys weren't really doing guitar solos, so there's no guitar solos on it. But it just makes up for it. It's a ferocious, mean, heavy record with a guy that does Billy's vocals are not screamo, but he's got a real rasp to his voice. So it's kind of like he's on that verge of screaming, but he's singing. Phenomenal fucking band. I love these guys so much. That's another one of those bands that anyone will listen to me, I will always promote the band Scrape. Great fucking band that deserves so much more than they got.
My son, when he was a bit younger, when he was a teenager, in the late 90s, got into like the new metal scene a little bit. And he was into like, he was into Slipknot, he was into Tantric, he was into, a whole handful of bands. He was listening to the Little Black Label Society. He had Seven Dust and, all these bits, he was into a lot of these bands that were popping up at that time. And I remember that was another one that he was talking about one day, and I went out and actually bought that for him. This great.
Really?
I remember, yeah. So he had that in his collection. He was listening to that quite a bit.
Awesome. Great record, man.
And I remember at the time thinking, okay, that's a really interesting CD cover, man.
How many people wanted to buy it and then saw it? Like, oof.
Yeah, that's like a buy. That's like a purchase killer, right? It's like,
yeah, never mind.
I don't know about that one. All right, my next choice here. Yeah, I love this album to death. I talked about this album on Steve Keeler's Rock Fantasy Files last week, and it's another one of those albums that you play start to finish, or at least I do. Can't take any song out of it. And I love it so much that if you were to sit me down and say, Pete, what are your top 3 favorite songs from this band? My top 3 favorite songs are the 3 main songs from this album. I'm talking about Animals by Pink Floyd, Absolutely love it. I love the songwriting on this album. I love the kind of nice use of acoustic guitar that works well with the stunning, the funky electric riffs, the great solos. You got both Waters and Gilmore singing lead on here, trading off at times. And it's a really kind of spooky, like kind of ominous, chilling album. And when I reach for Pink Floyd, 9 times out of 10, this is the album that I reach for. And I love this album to death. To me, it's their most perfect album. I know some people will cite, Dark Side of the Moon or Wish You Were Here or even The Wall. And I love like the majority of most of those albums, just like anybody else does. But I think for me, the absolutely perfect album from them, for me anyway, is I almost said Dark Side of the Moon, right? Because as my subconscious say, you should be saying Dark Side of the Moon, right?
Well, funnily, I just heard that record for the first time in its entirety last year.
Animals?
Yeah. I'm not, I appreciate Floyd. I appreciate Gilmore. I think he's a great player, brilliant player, great tone. But that was one of those things. I was never a pot guy, and I always just associated Pink Floyd with, especially growing up, through all that, going through high school and everything. And a friend of mine's brother had a thing full of CDs. He's like, "Yeah, you're a music guy. You take them." And I took what I wanted out of him that I didn't already have, and the rest I gave away to friends. And that was in there. And so I put it in the car and listened to it, and I'm like, "Hey, I recognize that one.
Of course.
Hey, I know that one. Hey, I know that one too. Hey, I know that one too." And then the record's over. I'm like, "Oh, that's it." I was like, "Oh shit!" I never realized I heard the whole thing. And I've heard the whole thing because they've been on the radio.
Oh yeah.
That's great. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I totally dig it. I'm a huge fan, and I've grown to love it even more as time has gone on. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
Number 2.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, there's so many albums to pick from, as you know, and everyone is watching. You're trying to think of your favorite 5 perfect records, and God knows there's so many more. And it's like, okay, what direction do I go? But to stay consistent to myself, I have to have Mr. Sykes in there somewhere. So I chose the Blue Murder album because it is perfect.
Absolutely.
This guy, again, everyone that's watching the channel is like, just shut up about John Sykes already. I can't help it. The guy, he means so much to me. I just look at the pictures. It's like, he's so fucking cool. And this record, man, coming from Lizzie in '83 and getting into Whitesnake and doing the American version of Slide It In, which is great. I love that. It's probably my favorite Whitesnake album, honestly. And then the '87 record, which is all him, and it's just, different Whitesnake, and I love it equally with Slide It In. And then he leaves that, and it's like, okay, well, Sykes was in his band, the videos are out, they're getting huge. What's Sykes gonna do? And then he put together a 3-piece and comes up with this epic sounding record. And then you're like, who's singing? Sykes is singing? And then you hear his voice, like, holy shit.
He's really good, yeah.
Exactly. He's a fucking phenomenal singer. And this record, there's 9 songs on this album, and there's not a dead. Sykes plays his ass off. His guitar tone is to die for. Carmine Appice, Tony Franklin. Oh my God. Just a brilliant record from 1989. So Blue Murder's self-titled debut, perfect.
And you know what? I'm going to mention the Montrose album again. It's very similar. You have these 2 dynamite debuts, and then that second album comes out, and it's like, what happened, right?
Yeah, not the
same. Good. Nothing but trouble's good, but not quite.
The first one is epic. It's got that theme throughout, and you feel it. And then the second one was more, not poppy, but more commercialized than what the first one was. So absolutely, definite feel to it.
Yeah, and the production is massive on that.
Oh, it's like the continuation of 1987, just heavier.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, and has Carmine's drums ever sounded better than on that album?
Oh,
I'm not talking about the playing itself, just the way it was produced. It's like, man, holy cow.
Brilliant record.
Holy cow. So we talked about Ted Templeman a couple times already on the show, right? Here's another one. I've seen a trend here today. This album, early 70s. I love this band, but specifically I love the era that this album comes from. They had a string of 3 or 4 albums that to me are just absolutely amazing, but this is the perfect one out of all of them. The Captain and Me by the Doobie Brothers. just a great mix of hard rockers, some more kind of ballady type stuff, some rootsy type stuff. I think this band really kind of blended their kind of biker rock early sound with that little more kind of accessible feel that they work with quite a bit. But this loaded with hits, right? You got Long Train Running, you got China Grove, South City Midnight Lady. These were all, big or fairly big hits. Without You, big heavy rocker. They still play it live to this day. You got the almost heavy metal Evil Woman, right? Cranking. I mean, this band could really rock out when they wanted to. I love Natural Thing. Dark Eyed Cajun Woman, another really good bluesy song. You got Busted Down Around O'Connelly Corners, Ukaya, the title track, just amazing, amazing album. This is like, for me, like one of those heartwarming, endearing classic rock albums. When you think of like classic rock, it doesn't get much better than this. But I love it because it's like there's stuff on here. There's some really ripping heavy rockers. There's a really memorable kind of anthemic type of tracks on here. Love it to death. The production is absolutely spot on. Great vocals, great guitar work, the whole 9 yards.
Skunk Baxter's on that one, right?
I
think
not yet. I don't believe he has joined the band yet at this point. But hold on, let me just double check. Let me double check. No, not yet. I believe he joins. I think on the next album.
Okay. Yeah, so then you just got just Johnson and Pat Simmons, man.
This is Johnston Simmons, John Hartman, Tyrone Porter, and Michael Costin.
Yeah, they were a great band, man. They really were. It's one of those bands that doesn't seem, it's like they were a huge band, but yet at the same time seem like they didn't get enough credit. It's like,
Yeah, you know what it is? They've got all these like songs that everybody knows, even before the Michael McDonald era, which obviously broke big there. But these albums were fairly good sellers, not like mega sellers, but good sellers. But I mean, how many of these songs from those first handful of albums are like still played on the radio? You go to see them live, they play all of them.
Yeah.
So, a band that probably not enormous, but almost there.
Yeah, almost there. Yep. No, great band for sure. Great pick. So for me, my last pick is honestly, I think it's probably one of two of the most, maybe one of three of the most important albums. This is definitely the most important album for me as a teenager. The other ones were preteen, which I still listen to today. So, but 1983, Dio's Holy Diver. Even the songs that, the people out there right now, but, Caught in the Middle is kind of, You know what? I think at the time, I didn't dislike it at the time, but it was like, okay, that's the filler. And I remember reading an interview with Ronnie James Dio around that time in 83, 84, and he had said that it was a filler, like they needed another song, and that was one of the songs that they kind of got together. But as time has gone by, I like it, again, running order, I can't skip it. It's different than the other ones, but it still fits, it's cohesive, and I don't find it a filler song at all anymore. I really do enjoy it. And Vivian Campbell, again, for me at 15 years old, finding this album, god damn, that this was the album in 1983 where I locked myself in my playroom with my stereo and just play guitar and try to learn stuff from Vivian, listening to this album. This album is it's been spun a lot of times in my life, and I don't get sick of it. And I'm just as giddy now as I was at 15 when I hear the opening riff of Stand Up and Shout. It just makes me smile to myself. And this is that's an important one, and I think it's absolutely perfect. It starts phenomenal with Stand Up and Shout, and it ends ominous with Shame on the Night. Is in everything in between. Oh man.
Yeah, I always liked Caught in the Middle. There was never a song on that album that I dislike at all. And I think out of all of the Dio band albums, that's the one for me that is perfect from start to finish.
Yeah.
Because even like Last in Line, which I love, it's my second favorite album, not quite perfect like that album is.
Yeah. There's a couple of fillers on that one, I think.
Yeah. And everything going forward after that. But that's a great choice. I still remember when that album came out. Woo. We all loved Ronnie so much when he was in Sabbath, and I remember we were all, at least I was, I was devastated when he left Sabbath. But then that album came out. We're like, okay.
Yeah, good enough for me.
Yeah. All right, my final pick for today is, many people cite this as the band's best album. It's not my favorite album from the band, but it is, when you talk about perfect albums, it absolutely is. There might be maybe 2 albums, maybe 3 in this band's catalog that are personal favorites of mine for various reasons. But when I look at this band's catalog, this album, start to finish, is amazing. It totally is. So I'm talking about so many great songs. Title track, Cross-Eyed Mary, Mother Goose, My God, Hymn 43, Winds Up, Locomotive Breath. I mean, these are like legendary songs. Yep. Even like the mellow stuff on here is absolutely amazing. Return, Slipstream, an amazing album. The production's great. I love how Tull went from, like, early on, that kind of like blues band, and then they started incorporating a little bit of folk with the blues and the hard rock, and then all of a sudden with this album, is it Prague? Maybe, then they would do Thick as a Brick after this, which was their first real Prague album. But there's some heavy stuff on here. Martin Barr's guitar solos and riffs, amazing. Ian sounds great on this album. I love his flute and his acoustic guitar work. I mean, it's just a great album. And of course, you got the amazing rhythm section. It's just a landmark album that, for me, is the definition of perfect. Doesn't get much better.
There you go.
So there you have it, everybody. Some more perfect albums, right? So curious to see what you guys think of our selection, and what are some of your perfect albums? So list them in the comments below. Which, and I always like going and reading while everybody.
The problem is that you guys, your comments are usually so awesome that you'll mention Ben. I'm like, shit, I totally forgot about that one. So it's like, it makes me feel it's like I don't have kids, but it's like picking your kids. And you forget something, you're like, oh man, and I'm like, it bothers me for like 3 hours that I forgot something.
I know. Yeah,
Great.
Because I tell you, we've got a lot of viewers who watch this channel who they're music nerds just like we do, and then they know all the obscure stuff and all the stuff, and it's that's what's so great about this, like, Sea of Tranquility community, right? It's like, it's just music enthusiasts. That's what we all are, right?
Yeah.
So, and I've always said, and what you talk about this all the time, it's like, doing this, I get the most satisfaction turning people on to music they've never heard before. But on the same token, there are times where people post stuff in the comments, I'm like, I never heard that. And they go, I'm like, there you go.
Yep.
Ways, right?
Yeah, it works both ways.
Yep, absolutely. So so there you have it, everybody. Thanks for joining. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. On Twitter, on YouTube, all the damn time. There's that gnarly toe again. Butch is, of course, on the channel quite often. He is a regular on the Hudson Valley Squares every Monday night, so stay tuned next week for that as well. Butch and I also have a very cool show we're putting together for you with some of our favorite guitar riffs of all time.
That's going to be
Stay
fun.
tuned for that over the next week or so. We'll be coming at you with that. Lots more here on the channel, so we'll see you all real soon. For Pete Pardo, actually, for Butch Jones, I am Pete Pardo. You know who I am now, right? So, for Butch Jones, I am Pete Pardo. We'll see you all later on. Bye-bye.